Good evening and welcome to tonight's debate on Star News between the two candidates for sheriff of Henry County. They are the incumbent, Sheriff Lane Perry, and his challenger, former investigator in the Sheriff's Department, Mr. Jerry Farmer. We'll be here for the next 90 minutes to hear answers to questions by the two candidates, questions from the audience who will have an opportunity to take part. Also, questions from viewers who have emailed questions in for tonight's debate, and I may even ask a question myself at some point. But of course, this event does not belong to me. It belongs, first of all, to the people of Henry County, and second to that, it belongs to the two candidates who have joined us tonight for the next 90 minutes. And our main purpose is to give you an opportunity, whether you're watching on TV or here in the studio audience, to hear what they have to say as you make up your minds about how to vote in this election. We're going to begin by having each candidate take 2 minutes to make an opening statement and say whatever they think they need to say to get things kicked off tonight. And Sheriff Perry, the incumbent, we will begin with you. So, sir, you have 2 minutes starting right now.
Thank you, Ken. I want to say it's a pleasure to serve as citizens of Henry County. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 23 years, started as a young man, and I've lived my entire life in this community. 9 years ago, I was elected or filled in as the interim sheriff and was later elected sheriff, and I've served 2 terms, serving you and leading the office with proven leadership. I'm a community person. Once again, I've lived here all my life. My wife and our 2 daughters, we're both residents of Henry County, raised here, and I take our community very important. Once again, it's been a pleasure serving you. We try to run a very professional office for you. We take great pride in the integrity of the men and women that serve you, the citizens. And with that, we have an office that will stand up against anyone in the region. Our technology that we've been able to incorporate into the office to serve you is state of the art. We have very good equipment for our officers to use, and hopefully that effect works on our cases as well. I have most of my time at the Sheriff's Office has been in the supervisory capacity, starting from the ground level up, working in the jail and going almost entirely through every position within the office. Most of them I've held and worked in. So I have a very good working knowledge of the Sheriff's Office. We have assembled a very good team for you, and we hope that's proven itself over the last 9 years. We've worked very well for you. We've gotten out in the community, and that's another thing, we're very community oriented. The neighborhood watch meetings, the civic organizations that meet, that we attend, going out to community breakfasts, and our volunteer services that do fundraising. I pass around to these events regularly throughout all of my time and go and meet the people and hear what they have to say. Once again, we take great pride in the office that serves you, and we do hold a high standard for the office, and it is a pleasure to serve you. Thank you.
And Sheriff, you finished right at the 2-minute warning, so good for you. Mr. Farmer, your 2 minutes starting now.
My name is Jerry Farmer. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 20 years. That was, when I got on at the Sheriff's Office, that was one of the happiest days of my life. You know, that was fulfilling a dream that I always wanted to do, and that was be a police officer. You know, I lived, you know, I attended Lower Park High School. Once I finished high school, I enlisted into the United States Army. I served 4 years overseas, and when I came back to Henry County, I served 3 years in the Virginia National Guard. And towards the end of my ETS date with the Virginia Guard, in 1995, I was hired by the Henry County Sheriff's Office. And as in that 20 years, I have worked my way up the ladder as jailer, a road supervisor, patrol in the patrol division. I've also worked as a brief stint as a drug investigator. My last 13 years was as a criminal investigator. I also worked as a school resource officer, and I was attached to the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. I'm also a dive master on the search and rescue team when I was there. And, you know, as I say, that was one of the happiest times as far as working there at the Sheriff's Office. But I've seen, I feel this part of this community, it's mine too. My son was born and raised here. My wife is born and raised here, and I just see stuff in the community that needs to be changed. I've seen the high crime rate, and I've seen just 9 years of procedures that just, it's not working. I mean, after 9 years, you can look at the crime stats. I mean, don't believe me, go to the...
Right. Ms. Farmer, that's your 2 minutes, but you'll certainly have an opportunity to continue with those points. In fact, our first question, I think, will feed right into what you were saying there at the end of your 2 minutes. I want to mention to the folks in the audience, if you would like to ask a question of the candidates, you'll see a microphone on the first row over to your left, and when you're ready to ask your question, approach that mic, and we will have somebody come over there and help you with that, and we will give you an opportunity to ask your question. We also have several email questions that I've collected, and we'll be getting to those in a few minutes. Mr. Farmer, you said that you were running for sheriff because of things that you see wrong in the department, and I think you were about to touch on some of those in your opening statement. One of the things you mentioned was morale. If I quote you correctly, you said morale was at a low point during your tenure in the sheriff's office. Can you talk about that? And also, I'm wondering, did you ever bring that issue up with Sheriff Perry and talk with him about it?
Well, I mean, he's the high sheriff. He's responsible for the morale. And, I still, like I said, I've been over there for 20 years. I still talk to a lot of the deputies. They're my friends, and, they're part of my family. You just don't work somewhere for 20 years and don't form a bond with a lot of those deputies that, they have your back out there, on the streets. And I still talk to them today. And they still, they still tell me the morale is low.
Why do they?
Because it's a combination of things. With me, it was coming into work, and stuff is piled on top of you and on top of you. And when you see your supervisors, to me, coming in, working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then getting, 50% of the time, they come in on Thursday, then just take a long weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. And you're working your hardest, and a lot of deputies and investigators, they're working their hardest to knock this crime rate down, to make this community safer, but you're just not getting the cooperation with your higher chain of command.
Well, let's give the sheriff an opportunity to comment on that. Supervisors just working half a work week?
No, sir, that is absolutely incorrect, and I haven't filled it in since, but early on in this, when that was a false allegation, I put together my time sheet. And beginning in January, which was a partial month, you have to work on a 160-hour cycle. But I ranged from 136.5 hours to my highest month being 191.5 hours. And I highlighted the yellow, and you can see the Thursday, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays that I worked. Our men and women that work at the office and our administration stands here, some of them are present. Our officers, some of them are present. I maintain that there was a very small handful of very unhappy people for whatever reason, but the bulk of the sheriff's office is working along, enjoying a good success rate. And I asked the people to look at the evidence of this, because we're out in the communities. As I go around, I'm hearing very positive comments. Our solution rate is higher than the state average, well higher than the state average, and I have the numbers. And if the office was in half the shape as is being described, it would be in shambles. You can ask our officers. I periodically, as passing by, help answer calls. A couple mornings ago, I beat the officers to a call. As I said, I came up through the ranks, I've worked every position, and I'm still to the point I get out there and help them. But I do not see the same thing that the opponent is seeing.
Well, of course, it sounds, I'm sure to the audience, like you two gentlemen are describing two different sheriff's departments. Mr. Farmer, would you be able to present a piece of paper, a documentation, something to substantiate your
Well,
allegation?
as the sheriff says, he's got his timesheet. I had the same timesheet. I had a lieutenant that looked over mine to make sure it was correct. As far as I know, I don't think nobody looks over the high sheriffs. So we have to take his word that, you know, this is true. Now, if he really wanted to convince people, I say go to dispatch and see every time a deputy logs on, it has to be recorded through dispatch, and see how many times car 1 and car 2 signed on with dispatch on Thursdays.
These numbers came from dispatch.
Ms. Farmer, have you done that? Have you looked at the numbers?
No, I have not. All I see is his timesheet.
All right, and when you talk to deputies now with the department and they tell you how unhappy they are there any other issues that
Well, I
they
mean,
present?
this administration is led by threats and intimidation, and just like most of the lieutenants over there, they were pretty much told that we work at the will of the sheriff. Here comes the election coming up. They're being told constantly, you work at the will of the sheriff. And even the sheriff himself, and I can show deputies that used to work over there, said when they came on, one thing he always told them, if you ever run against me, I'll fire you. And he hold true to that. He hold true. I give him that. He did hold true to that. Because when he found out I was running against him, hand me the paperwork, turn your badge and gun in.
Sheriff, do you tell new deputies that if they run against you, they'll be fired?
I absolutely have not. I have never had that conversation with any deputy that's been hired, and I asked the opponent very adamantly to produce and prove and have a person stand there.
It was Jeremy Moore.
No, we did not have that conversation.
That's why
at
he
his
told
hiring.
me.
Deputy Jeremy Moore. He's not, I don't guess he's here by any chance, is he?
No, he's not.
Sheriff, you did fire Mr. Farmer when he ran against you.
Yes, sir, I did.
And why did you do that?
One of the things that we have to do is we have to look out for the office. Basically, an election can go 6 months or longer. We have an obligation to finish out a term, and you have to look at a bigger picture that takes place. One thing I will back up and paint is a picture of people who are not happy. They will not be quiet within an office, and this office has to serve. And what if it's be 1, 2, 3, or many more people who just decide, I want to run for sheriff? The office will become in shambles, and the community is the one that suffers. This office has to go from the beginning of the term of the elected official to the end. And this was done to maintain the stability and efficiency of the office to serve as citizens throughout the entire time.
Ms. Farmer, was your decision to run for sheriff, was that contributing to low morale or any sort of problem in the office?
No, when the senior staff found out that I was running for office, Sheriff Lane Perry had just came back from Pigeon Forge off vacation. I was called into the office, and he told me, he'd been addressed once by 1 or 2 people. I mean, I don't know who they were because I didn't tell nobody. My wife, just me and my wife knew. So the only people that knew it had to be the senior staff, because they probably went over to the registrar's office and found out I was running. And then, so the only people he's referring to, it had to be a senior staff that brought it up to his attention, because I didn't tell nobody.
How did you find out, Jim?
I was informed. I mean, it becomes public knowledge when someone files to run for a public office. And with that, I was told, and when I come back, was true. Basically, the meeting was short, but I did ask the opponent if I understood that he wanted to have a meeting when I come back, and I offered him the meeting. He said he had nothing to say, and I basically said, well, then you will not be allowed to continue around here during this time frame.
He was in the department for a long time. Was he a good deputy, a good investigator?
Well, if he chooses to, that is a personnel matter that I would love to explain my side of, but being a personnel matter, unless he gives me permission to speak, I cannot answer that question.
Mr. Farmer, any comment on that?
He would love to try to bring up I will tell you my record. And since 2004, I have done almost 1,200 cases. And he himself told me I had one of the best work ethics in the department. You told me that to my face. I put probably more child predators in jail than anybody over there. So he was doing what was best for the community. So, I mean, I have always been a worker. I have been working since probably the age of 12. My first job was a farmhand. I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. I'm not afraid to work. And Lane knows this.
Sheriff, did you tell him he had one of the best work ethics in the department?
I probably did say something that he had a strong work ethic. When something generally negative is going to be said, generally you preface it with something encouraging, but I will maintain once again, we're only hearing one side. If I do have some things that I would share for the viewers who are making an informed decision, but he chooses not to allow me to speak about the things that would be my side of this issue.
Mr. Farmer, would you give the sheriff permission?
I have never been wrote up. I have never been suspended in the 20 years at that office. And like Lane says, I've had one of the strongest work ethics than anybody in the department, and that's from his mouth. He's just trying to get in my personnel because, like I said, he can get in there. I don't know what else he put in there since I left. So am I going to give him permission to air whatever he put in my personnel file? No, I am not, because like I said, in 20 years, I've never been suspended for nothing. I've got commendations for doing a good job through the sheriff's office that I can produce. I got Army commendations for doing a good job in the military. And like I said, I'm a worker. I've never been afraid. I've never shied away from hard work and never will.
Sheriff Perry, over the last, let's say, 3 years, what's been the turnover rate among your personnel in the Sheriff's Department?
I don't have an exact percentage. One of the things characterized by that is a number of retirees, and those generally happen in waves. You will have 5 to 6 people retire at a time. And then we also had a number of people, when this office serves, and I don't like to go backwards in time, but with that, I've been there a number of years, and I actually saw what happened in 2006 while never knowing the corrupt acts, but I think I saw some of the lifestyles and seeds that led to what happened. So with that, to serve the community with integrity, when someone is not doing what they're supposed to do, we counsel them, we talk to them, sometimes it's to the point we can offer remedial training, we can do a multitude of things, but if someone chooses to continue in a behavior that will not represent the community with integrity, sometimes we have to part ways, and there are a handful of those that are included in the last couple of years.
Mr. Farmer, do you know of deputies who have left the department because they had similar concerns to yours?
There was a couple. One deputy, he left, and like I said, I don't know. I can just tell you what they told me. He wasn't happy with the administration, and he was a young deputy, and he left. And there has been a lot of officers that have left. Some under suspicious circumstances, as far as maybe doing wrongdoing. A lot committing adultery. Some that is still doing it, and I believe Lane knows a couple that is probably still there that has committed adultery.
We have to take a break. Gentlemen, you can relax for a couple of minutes. For the studio audience, let me remind you, if you have a question, if you'd like to ask the candidates a question, just to go to that mic over there on your left, and we'll give you an opportunity to do that. And our Sheriff's Debate will continue on Star News after these messages. Welcome back to tonight's debate between the two candidates for sheriff of Henry County, the incumbent, Sheriff Lane Perry, and his challenger, Mr. Jerry Farmer. As we mentioned earlier, we'll have an opportunity for audience members to ask questions tonight, and I believe we have someone in the audience with a question to ask. So, sir, if you would step up to the mic there and go right ahead with your question.
Greetings to you both and blessings. I have a question. My name is Fred Akers, and I'm new to the Henry County area. Been here now for about 2 years. Grew up here as well, and retired from the military and moved back 2 years ago. My question is, what youth programs do you plan to offer, or already offer, or are going to offer in the future with your candidacies, as far as like to prevent crime, or in-school programs, or like a Scared Straight program where they visit the prisons and different things like that? Is there such a program? If not, will there be such a program?
Mr. Farmer, why don't you start?
Yeah, as I stated before, one of the things I would love to do was to fix up the community, the Fieldale Community Center, and run programs right out of that office. And I also want to do more in the school system as far as drug awareness. And I've always said you have to invest money in our children. I remember from an early age, probably 7 or 8, we had police officers come in our elementary school and told us about drugs. And to this day, I still remember that. And I think it's very valuable. I think it's very important to do drug awareness, internet crimes against children, bullying. I mean, there's a drinking and driving, all types of programs that need to continuously go through the high schools. And also, like I said, I want to fix the Fieldale Community Center up and run programs right out of that center. And as far as the Scared Straight, I remember that when I was in the jail. I don't know if we still have it or not. That's something that's taken on, base to base. I mean, you just can't take a bunch of kids and just walk them through the catwalk and get scared, scared to death. It'll traumatize them. But, there are certain circumstances when you have a kid and nothing else is working. And, I mean, you got to be real careful with that Scared Straight. I heard sometimes it works and sometimes it don't.
Sheriff Perry, what's being done right now regarding the concerns that the questioner expressed?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Akers, for your question. With that, I will say we do a very demanding job for the community, and with that, we want those strong community ties. Well, we do find out there's a mixture of things that take place. Sometimes by the mere fact when we go out and answer a call, we find troubled youth. I know the officers are spending time. When we're out, it's been a potentially emotional challenge situation. They talk to them, they explain to them, because someone else, an authoritative figure, can have reasoning abilities with them sometimes and point out that they want to get through some of these hurdles. Sometimes it's just the fact that they don't believe in what their parents are instilling, and sometimes we're able to say that we support that. Sometimes, unfortunately, there are some things that we probably have to agree that they don't have the best support system, but we encourage them to be productive citizens, go out and concentrate on their grades. So we have a lot of interaction with youth. Now with this, we do a job that takes up our complete time. We'll say that there is not money within our budget, and it is not a means of fixing up a place. You also have to have people that want to volunteer their time. We do have officers that participate in various organizations that youth come around. Did have some that participated with the sports programs. We have some of the officers with their children. They'll coach like little leagues and things like that and have that positive interaction. But what we also have to see is when the officers do a very demanding job for the community, they also have to have that time to spend with their own family as well. We go into the schools. We have done some drug awareness, but what we found out when the school board asked us in our role with the school resource officers, they said, we want you to build those positive relationships so that you have people that will come and tell you information. And at the time, the National Guard had a very good drug awareness program that they were coming in, and they thought that the relationship with the National Guard doing the drug awareness and us being a police presence, but being a approachable presence was the best relationship within a school environment. We do offer groups anytime it's asked. We go out and speak about gang awareness, and we talk about the positive choices of youth, that getting through those teenage years, the drinking, the alcohol, and the pitfalls that they can fall into, to say that there's a structured program, but what we try to do is meet the requests of the community, and then there's also that time with the calls that we're going out on.
Mr. Farmer, one of the things that you say you want to do in this area is put a resource officer in every school. Does the department have the resources to do them? And the sheriff just indicated that maybe there's a shortage of money for some things that would be good to do.
Well, he always says there's a shortage of money. It's just like the Fieldale Community Center. He just dismisses that idea. At least I have the vision to attempt and want to try to do something for the community. And that's what we need. We need somebody that at least, hey, let's try that. Hey, it may not work, but let's try. But as far as the school resource officers, yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's very possible. If it takes lowering my salary, if elected, and my chief deputy to get school resource officers in there, that's what I will do.
Sheriff, would your salary pay for enough resource officers?
No, I'm afraid it wouldn't. And what I do want to say, we have, I think it's at least 9, if not more, elementary schools. We would love to see those schools with a resource officer, but when you have every officer, their package, the package for the officer, their employment, the benefits the county provides, you're looking at $45,000 to $50,000 per officer per school each year. Then also if you have to provide equipment and a vehicle. And now there's only 2 choices. You either pull from the patrol shifts and investigations which are serving as citizens and pull from those ranks to put in these positions, or someone has to come up with a very substantial amount of money. And when Sandy Hook happened, our Board of Supervisors and our school board sat down, and the governing bodies that govern us said, we would love to do this as well, but we do not have the money at this time to do this.
Mr. Farmer, you look like you want to get back in here. From what you know about the department, do you think there is some efficiency, some management idea that could be applied to the department to make it possible to get an officer in every school?
At least, I would try. I would do everything I can to put officers in there. And there are things that you can try to do instead of just leaving those elementary schools, just off to themselves. Even if it took a school resource officer to, work half here, between 2 schools, I would do what it takes because there needs to be an officer in those schools. But at least I'm willing to entertain and try to do that. But the sheriff can't be done. We ain't even going to look at it.
I'll remind the audience members, if any of you have questions, just approach that mic over there and we'll give you an opportunity to ask those questions. Sheriff Perry, you talked about how the drug scene has changed in the county over the years, how you're seeing different things now than what you've seen before. How is the Sheriff's Department evolving and changing to meet the new threat from drugs?
Well, with that, having 23 years in, I've seen one of the changes that took place. It used to be that time frame back, one of the predominant drugs that had the highest negative effect on the community was cocaine. Well, over the course of time, that's turned, and I think our predominant drugs now are pills, heroin, and meth. And what you have is people, the high that comes from those lasts longer, so you have people, cocaine has a very short high. You have people running around under the influence of drugs more. And I've also seen a change where those number of years ago, you had a few people selling a lot of drugs and the drug indictments began. Now there are a substantial number of people selling some drugs, and that's one of the ways that it's changed. With the Sheriff's Office, in the last 7.5 years, we've made 1,155 drug arrests. That is not paraphernalia or other charges. That is either pure possession or possession with intent to distribute. Along with that, one of the things that we do is we're very aggressive towards the money, which is the trophy of the drug dealers and the property that they've acquired, poisoning our community, and this is what comes back to us through asset forfeiture. And over the last 7 years, we have been able, through asset forfeiture, taking money from the drug dealers to supplement the office and buy state-of-the-art equipment. We've taken in about $349,000. We are very aggressive. We use the latest technology. We use every system that we can to go out, but it still maintains you have to have a case that is legal, that it was done properly, and it can maintain a conviction.
Mr. Farmer, this sort of ties into some of the points you were making about communicating with youth and developing relationships. From your time inside the department and from what you are able to find out now from outside the department, how do you assess the way the department has grown and reacted to these new drug threats and these new circumstances?
Well, as far as I know, the crime rate has gone up because, like, if you look at the crimes, you look at the drug-related crimes. You got your addicts breaking into your house. You got your addicts taking your lawnmower off your carport, taking it down to the pawn shop. You got little Johnny stealing grandpa's checkbook and writing checks. You know, that's fraud. You got vehicle thefts because they're trading it out for drugs and then they're reporting it. I mean, it's a slew of charges. And like I said, I got a chart right here, and I'll show it, put it right here, and that shows, and a lot of those are drug-related crimes. And I've seen a lot as far as prescription pills. As being an investigator, I've seen a lot of overdoses. I've seen abuse with prescription pills. It's by far way out in front.
Sheriff Perry, I'm going to take it that you know what the numbers are on that card without looking at it, but what do you have to say about that?
Well, that is just a snapshot set of numbers. It really is nothing that is taken great stock in because we could go on for 5 minutes about the factors that go into the crime rate. The one thing is about the reporting systems. You have to even go into the sentencing of events. We have a population here and we have crime just like everywhere else. One of the things that I would point to is that our sheriff's office, through legislation, when scrap metal theft was very heavy, we fought with legislation that made this better. And when talking about scrap metal shops and pawn dealers, we use things like leads on lines where they have to report and take pictures of the driver's license. This gives us the best availability to go out and search for stuff that's been traded in, that was stolen, and these things are successful. Those crime rates really don't mean anything in comparison to anyone else, and my counter is that in 2014, the state average solution rate for crime was 31%. The Henry County Sheriff's Office was 59%. In 2013, the state solution rate was 31%. Our office was 44%. In 2012, it was once again 31% for the state. The Henry County Sheriff's Office cleared 50% of its cases. And in 2011, we cleared 46% of the cases that we worked. This is well above the state average.
Well, I mean, certainly those are impressive numbers, but I think the question Mr. Farmer is asking, Mr. Farmer, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is why are those numbers so much larger in Henry County than in those neighboring counties? And they are quite a bit larger. I mean, what factors, both of you, what factors do you think account for that?
Well, my biggest thing is leadership. Point blank, it's leadership. You have Pennsylvania County that has 5,000 more in population, but they are a lot lower in the crime. And I'm sure Lane will tell you, well, you know, you got to take this in consideration. You got to take this in consideration. But right down to it, what you have to take in consideration is who your sheriff is. And I'll state it again. you need a sheriff that's going to be in office more than 3 or 4 days a week
Well, we
to
need
lower that crime rate.
We have to go to break pretty quickly, but let me ask you very quickly, the solution rates that the sheriff quoted, would you agree that those are impressive
Well,
solution
if
rates?
you're satisfied, I mean, if people satisfied with that, vote for him. I think we can do a whole lot better. When I first went to investigation, I think my second or third year, he says 50% and way over the clearance rate. I had 70% clearance rate because I did my job. I know what my job was.
Well, we do have to take a break, and there's a lady waiting to ask a question. And ma'am, if you would just wait until after this commercial break, we will give you an opportunity to ask your question. And we will continue with tonight's debate on Star News after these messages. Welcome back to tonight's debate between the two candidates for sheriff in Henry County, the incumbent, Sheriff Lane Perry, and his challenger, a former investigator and deputy, Jerry Farmer. We have an audience member with a question to ask to the candidates, so ma'am, go right ahead with your question.
Taking into consideration the aggression that's been directed towards law enforcement and the general mistrust that's developed from that aggression here in the past year, how do you intend to, or have you taken the steps to strengthen both the relationship between your own department and the community?
Sheriff Perry, what do you say to that?
Very good question. Thank you. One of the things is maintaining positive community relationships, and some of the groups that we've been addressing recently, we're talking about what has to be done. In the community, we are the last vestige of a peace for people to lay down their head at night and have some resemblance of safety that someone doesn't come in their home. There's the acts against the officers that are coming into question, and then some of the things that are happening around the United States. And this has shaken the sense of safety of society. We're working very hard to maintain that, and we very actively go and pursue the most violent crimes. We enjoy a very good success rate on violent crime, trying to keep that down so people have safety. Then next, which it comes back into the drug problem. But talking to people, professional work, the day and age of body cameras, so we can ensure that we're doing the best job for the citizens, so that they have that trust in us. If there's a question with something, we can pull it up and look at it. And this has already happened a time or two, and I do want to say that the questions that have come into play, the officers have done what they were supposed to. These are the things, but we have to show them we're doing a professional job. We have to reach out, but I think there's also a coming time frame where we have to truly learn to appreciate each other and understand the role and work together in the communities. These will also lead to the things that are happening, such as the positive youth influences that we need to see. So there is a lot there, but it's just basically reaching out in communities, talking, building relationships, and expressing we need each other and we need our safety, and when something happens, not to get out of hand, but let's go in and investigate it properly, look at the evidence is there, and see if someone was in the right or the wrong.
Ms. Farmer, the audience member certainly raised an important issue there. How would you, as sheriff, go about dealing with that?
Well, I think we need to have better relationships with the community, and you know, I was approached just the other day by a lady who said that I remember that they were looking for 2 individuals from the city, and they came over into the county. It was on Cedar Court, and the lady said that they brought the armored vehicle. They had at least 15, 20 armed men with their vests, assault rifles, and a lot of times I think it's an overkill. And the woman was very upset, because there's a lot of elderly people that live on that street who were traumatized to see this happening right outside their door. And the 2 people that they were looking for, since they came down there, looked like Sherman Army coming into Georgia, they ran out the back door 15 minutes before they got there, and they never did find them. But they did turn themselves in to the Martinsville City I can't remember if it was that day or the next day. But, you know, we need to have better relationships with the community. And I was approached by another a lady who says she went over to the high school. She had 2 children in her minivan. She was just going in, just pick something up and come right back out. And she seen 2 police officers right there, you know, just talking at the cars, not going nowhere. And they say, and the woman said, "Can you please do me a favor and just watch my vehicle while I go in real quick? I'm coming right back out." And they said, "No, we can't do that. That's not our job." And she's like, "You got to be kidding me." And so I guess she took her children in, and she said, Lane might know this because she said Lane showed up before she left. But, I mean, this is a perfect opportunity. Yeah, ma'am, just going in there, we'll watch your car if it's just going to be a few minutes. You know, we have to get better with the relationship with the community and stop acting like we're better than them.
Sheriff Perry, first of all, the incident with the armored vehicle and the assault rifles, would you like to make any comment on that?
I don't know exactly the incident he was talking about. I will say that in the day and age we live in, we have to go back to, as was the former question, officers are ambushed in other places. We do and have had barricaded hostage situations periodically through the time frame here in Henry County. You need equipment that you can actually get in close to something and you can move equipment and people around. What we have come to realize over the course of time through things that have happened around the United States is how we bring that equipment in and out. We recently had an incident where a community was called, what's called swatted. A fake call was called in, that it was a very serious call, a man who was getting ready to do bad things within a community. We moved our resources very quickly, but through that we've now realized, all right, let's go in, but we also have to wear vests. We do have to have weapons that we can meet someone in resistance with, and then we have our other equipment staged just a short distance away so that we don't have an effect. We can investigate it, see how it's escalating, de-escalating, or whether or not it's accurate. Yesterday, or day before yesterday, we had a situation, a call came in where it was a potential hostage situation. When our officers arrived, the person surrendered. We walk a very fine line of danger, and we do have to have equipment, but we are learning, as everyone's learning over the course of time, how do we have our equipment there if it's needed, but not have people to the point that they're on guard or offended by it.
Mr. Farmer, would it be your preference that the Sheriff's Department not have an APC and that sort of thing?
Well, I mean, I've stated numerous times that we had armored vehicle. I know I don't want to beat a dead horse. We had armored vehicle, and I said it was good for what we needed. We didn't need to spend $300,000 on another one. So I mean, in that situation down on Cedar Court, no, I personally do not feel that we needed that armored vehicle. I mean, I believe you could have sent 3 or 4 officers down there. They probably would have found them, they would have arrested them, and everything would have been fine.
We have another audience member, I think, ready with a question. Sir, if you would just stand up to the mic and go ahead and ask your question, please.
Thank you. Thank you guys for allowing me to be here. Wanted to ask, because it's been kind of frustrating to hear it and to know that he has been right there in the community. Sheriff Perry, if you please would, I've heard it been said that you are not out in the community enough. Could you please, I know you're a very humble man, but could you please tell people about the fatherhood events that you've been to out in the community, that you've been to the Good News Prison Ministry, and every other organization that I don't know where you find the time to do it, but could you please talk about that?
Yes, and thank you. It is what the gentleman said is true. I have the records right here because something was said about neighborhood watches. I have the actual documentation. If I attend a neighborhood watch meeting, I ask the question, do you have any needs of me? I have the actual handwritten papers from 62 neighborhood watch meetings that I've attended over the course of time. The groups such as Ruritans, the Lions Clubs, various other organizations ask the Sheriff's Office to come in, and I generally do these personally myself, come in and speak to them for whatever topic they would like, be it drug awareness, home safety, various other things. As was said, any church that makes a request, we honor that request. Sometimes it's bringing some of our equipment out and letting the young people see us in a positive role model light with the equipment, because at a young age, children think they want to be a police officer, firefighter, and we do these things. But as was spoken of as well, fatherhood events, and some of these things take a good portion of a day. I have attended these meetings. Good News Jail Ministry, I am elected to serve the citizens, and when a request comes in, I have been going out and a lot of times doing this myself, attending to their needs, meeting them, and showing them their community is important. I travel all around the county with the fundraisers for the rescue squads, the breakfasts for the Ruritans, and I go around the entire county, and I'm very thankful for the relationships that we've made.
Mr. Farmer, if you want to say something specific about the fatherhood program, certainly do that. But I want to add to that one point, which you said as sheriff you would be honest, approachable, visible, and involved, which sort of implies that you don't think Sheriff Perry is involved enough in the community. Would you elaborate on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what everybody's telling me. They call, they can't get them. You know, I know that was kind of a loaded question directed towards Perry, and I know he does a whole lot with his church. And I'm a Christian too. I'm also a foster parent. You know, me and my serving as an ICAC on the ICAC task force, I've seen the need in children that go without parents, that's been abused. I've seen babies have fractured skulls, fractured arms. I've seen all that. That drove me to, I wish I could do more for these children. And I did. I became a foster parent. The first child I had, he was almost starved to death. 1 or 2 more days, the doctor said he would have been dead. The second child we had was an infant. He was addicted to meth. Me and my wife took 5-6 months, and we weaned him off of that meth. And we still have a relationship today with that child. So, I mean, I see going out and I've seen firsthand going out into the houses, the devastation that the drugs have done to these families, communities. I've seen firsthand that these houses being broken into. I didn't just pull a brief stint in investigations. I was back there for 13 years. So I've been back there. I've met the people, met the family, some of them formed relationships with. So, I know what's out there in the community, and I know I can help the community. That's all I want to do is help the community. I know I can lower this crime rate and make it a better place to live.
Well, I mean, clearly both of you are to be congratulated for the things that you've described in the last couple of minutes. But Mr. Farmer, I guess my question to you is, do you see, and it seems to be implied from your comment, do you see a way that the Sheriff's Department administratively is falling short in establishing good community relations? What would you change? What would you do differently?
First of all, we have the more newer officers than I've ever seen over at the Sheriff's Office. Because for some reason we have veteran officers that are leaving or being fired. Because the people I've talked to, and I've talked to supervisors, they said as soon as they get their 20 years, they're out of there. They don't want to stay at this administration because they don't like the way it's run. And that's sad, because we got these new officers, and that's part of the problem. You got these newer officers out here answering calls. They were taken out of the jail, put in a car, and go answer calls. And they're not being as well trained as they need to be trained, because we're losing veteran officers that need to be training these young guys.
Well, Sheriff Perry, let's talk about that training. What do you think of Mr. Farmer's assertion that new officers are not being effectively trained?
Well, to start out with a young officer, one of the things that we've tried to do now to be more efficient, since we're a full-service agency, you have a correction certification and you have to be law enforcement certified. Rather than do these individually, we put the 2 schools together, but they go to school for almost 5.5 months to learn that in whatever capacity they want to serve the community, they come out 5.5 months. Along with that, every 2 years they have to have 40 hours of training for recertification. There's a lot of specialized skills within the Sheriff's Office. We send to training for that. I would say our officers are highly trained. But it does come to the point, you can send them to training all the time, but we do have a job to serve as citizens, and we have to get that training and put it out on the road. Because when an officer's gone to training, they're not serving the citizens. And that's the cut and dry of it. They are adequately trained. I think they are very well trained, and they get out and do the job. The issues, the morale, I am not seeing at all. I'm still maintaining, as once before, that 3 or 4 were highly disgruntled, but our officers work very well together, and the efficiency that I've spoke of within our office, I think we're serving the community well.
Mr. Farmer, 5.5 months in school, I mean, it sounds like a lot of school training.
That is
but
long.
how would you change the approach once they get out of school? What would you do differently for training in the field?
They need good supervision. They need veteran officers. Like I said, when I first came on to the road, Lane was on my shift, and so was James Keaton, and I believe Craig O'Dare. And we had a good supervisor. His name was Ronnie Minner, Sergeant Minner. Not Minner. I can't remember. Sergeant, mistaken. But he was a good supervisor. This is what he did. He didn't just give us to one officer. He would let us ride along for like 2 or 3 weeks with each officer. And you take what worked for you, what worked best for you. Because you can't just follow one deputy and just do exactly what he says, because there are techniques. And that's what we did. I probably took some techniques from Lane. I took some from Keaton. I took some from Craig O'Dare. And I think by doing that made me an excellent officer.
Well, we're going to have to take a break very quickly. A very short answer, Sheriff Perry. Is that sort of infield training, does that still take place in the department?
Well, what happens is under this day and age of liability, it's called a field training officer. And they actually have to sign off on the standards for Department of Criminal Justice Services that they watched or supervised or explained the standard. This is why they have to follow an officer around. But generally when they come out of the academy after 5.5 months, they spend around 6 to 8 weeks, at least a month, with other officers, primarily the field training officer, and they also learn what other divisions do. And
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there because we have to take a break. We'll have another question from the audience when we come back with more of our Sheriff's Debate after these messages. Welcome back to the next portion of our debate tonight between the 2 candidates for sheriff of Henry County. The incumbent is Sheriff Lane Perry. His challenger, former deputy and investigator in the department, Jerry Farmer. We have several audience members who want to get questions in this part of our debate. So, ma'am, I believe you're first in line. Walk up to the mic and ask your question, please.
Cindy Donovan, and I have a kind of split question. I think you both can agree that the children in Henry County are our future. And if we can't turn them around and start things going in a better direction, we're going to be done for. If we can get funding for armored vehicles and different things, can someone not work and get funding for resource officers and different youth programs? And Mr. Farmer, if you become sheriff, how would you try to get the funding?
Well, there's like I said, I know it wouldn't be sufficient, but I would lower my pay and my chief deputy's pay if need be to help get us more officers. And I know there's a lot of elementary schools. If I had to put part-time employees in those positions, that's what I'll do. There's just one thing that I would like to do, try to talk to the superintendent and see about we trust our children with these teachers, have our children all day long. We trust them. And one thing I would like to just check into is taking a teacher or two from those elementary schools. We have veterans that are in there. We have good people that are in these elementary schools. Why not see if we can't send them through the academy, make them an auxiliary deputy, and let them have a badge and gun. I've seen that happen before. I've seen it happen in another county in Virginia. It was two, one was a teacher, and I can't remember what the other employee was, but they worked at the school, and they were auxiliary deputies, and they were there, and they had their gun and badge almost all the time.
Sheriff Perry, is that a workable idea?
Well, with the intent of the question, it is everyone wants their children safe. Everyone wants the best environment. They want the most positive role models around their children. One of the things that there seems to be a cloud of confusion with asset forfeiture money, but asset forfeiture money, you cannot predict how much you're going to get. You cannot have it where it is recurring costs within a budget. So that just has to be removed from the table, because this year you might seize $5,000, next year you might not seize any. That money cannot be used for personnel. Now coming back in with part-time people, I am for making our children safe. But what we had was a process that took place, and I alluded to it some time back. The Board of Supervisors met, the school board met, they talked about readjusting some of the funds to put school resource officers in the elementary schools, and they decided not to. It comes down to a point that there has to be this money for that, or the creation of money for part-time. While that is an idea, but we also have to be very careful. With good intent, we may not put the best person around this environment. Short period back, we saw an incident that occurred with someone that was probably a little bit of an aged person and not an experienced person around some of the volatile situations and quick moving situations, and a bad incident occurred in our nation. I have to say, we want to take care of our children, but we have to do it through the process where it's agreed upon, the money's there, and the only other option is pulling from within our ranks to do that. So what happens to the community? And we pick the highest risk environments, the high schools and middle schools, and these have our full-time school resource officers. Now, they do go out to the elementary schools periodically and at request to work, and if need be, a patrol officer, if it's called, they can respond. So there is a mixture of things.
Mr. Farmer, the incident that the sheriff referred to, I think happened in Oklahoma, I believe it was, with the auxiliary deputy involved in the shooting. Would that be of concern to you?
Well, I'm not familiar with that. But if he goes through the academy, they will be trained. Not only, you have a principal, vice principal, and they will be routine checked on by a regular school resource officer. Yes, there's a lot of things that you have to look, but it's better than doing nothing. We need to put some people in these schools, and I think we trust these people, these school teachers, every day with our children. Why not? Why is it so impossible to think you could arm? You could send them through the academy and make them an auxiliary deputy, and that way they can protect our children.
Another question from the audience, sir. Go right ahead.
Mike Rogers. I'll start out by thanking you, Jerry, for your service to our country like I do every military officer, and I appreciate both of you having served in law enforcement. Lane, I especially appreciate your leadership, the great spirit of cooperation, and the ability we had to get along so well with each other. My question relates to officer safety, which in my mind is the most critical thing that a sheriff or chief of police or anybody, not only the safety of their officers, but the safety of their citizens. And I appreciate very much the understanding that I had with Sheriff Perry, whereby if one of his officers was in the county or one of my officers in the city needed help, we both had an agreement that the officers didn't have to ask for permission. They could leave and go and help that officer. Many times, and Jerry, you may have been one of them that came to the city that backed up our officers, and likewise, I know our guys went out in the county. But when you talk about the armored vehicle, I want to compliment the sheriff on getting a good state-of-the-art vehicle. You don't need something that's going to break down when you got officers pinned down by gunfire, relying on a vehicle that's 20 or 30 years old that's not reliable anymore. So I thank you for that, because you can't put a price on an officer's life. Now, my question is this, there's a lot of programs. If the sheriff's department had 200 more officers, you wouldn't see this crime. But the bottom line is every law enforcement agency in the United States could double or triple the amount of officers they have and do a whole lot better job. Your resources are limited. Both of you are talking about programs that you'd like to do or that you're presently doing. What is the balance between having those programs and then still having enough officers out on the street so that they have the backup when they need it?
All right, thank you very much, sir. And I guess that's one of the hardest things any sheriff has to deal with. Mr. Farmer, would you like to answer?
Well, I mean, take your COP and run programs through them. Take your school resource officers, like I said, I was, and you know, send them through training to where they can give classes at the school to give them more training. I mean, that you're not taking anything off the road. And as far as that, like I said, you know, I'm beating a dead horse when I keep talking about that armored vehicle. I'm all for officer safety. I would never jeopardize an officer's safety. And I mean, numerous times as an investigator, when I would answer calls and back up road officers, it didn't matter if it was city or county. I mean, that is by far the best. You know, I want these officers to go home every day just like any normal person. But we know that's not the case because whenever there's problems, especially lethal problems, instead of running away from it, we run towards it because that's what makes us police officers. You know, we want to help the community. But again, yeah, that's a great thing. I mean, we can disagree. We had and like I said, we had a armored vehicle. You say it was too old, it wouldn't work. You know, I wish you could drive it up here and we'll shoot it with a gun just to prove that it would stop a bullet. But you know, if that was the case, if it was so if it was reasonable that the city, well, I mean, why didn't the city buy an armored vehicle? I mean, they could have bought one just as much as we could have, but they didn't because they probably realized, you know, it was too expensive and it's not in their best interest, especially if they didn't already have one. I mean,
our time is kind of getting short, Mr. Farmer. Thank you. Sheriff, your comments on that question?
One of the biggest things is the communications between officers, the networking and partnering with the agencies, and what you spoke of. The officers being able to listen to each other, even though we have our jurisdictions we serve, and I'm very thankful for yourself and Sheriff Draper, who's present, and some of his officers who are in support. With that, us listening to each other, backing up each other, these are the best things, our communications. But in the day and age we live, there are some real threats, and they happen very fast, unfortunately. The good, decent citizens just want to move around. They want to enjoy peace, and they're now living in untimed period of history where they question, is it safe to go to Walmart anymore? Is there something that's going to happen? When we respond to these emergencies, we do have to have equipment such as Kevlar, and then we have alluded to incidents that happen such as barricaded hostage situations, and we have to have something that stops bullets. Buying a piece of equipment like that is to the point that it serves a region right here. It serves your jurisdiction, it serves Henry County, and we've offered it up to other people. But keeping our officers safe, this is what will go into the morale, keeping the morale high as it is, because they know that people are backing them, they're looking out after them, we're giving them the best equipment we can, and someone is close to them.
Sheriff, if you could answer this one as quickly as possible, please. How much forfeiture money went into buying the armored vehicle, and how much public money?
I actually have the breakdown for that. With that, asset forfeiture money was $161,795. There was a grant of $35,749 that went into it, and then out of our existing budget, we did not ask for extra money, $46,290 went into it for a total of $243,834.
All right, one more audience member with a question. Sir, go ahead.
My name is Joshua Edwards. My question is, since we're already on the topic of the vehicles and stuff like that, my question is, the sheriff himself drives what it looks to me as a Ford Taurus with turbo in it, and at one point it was the only turboed vehicle in the county and still possibly is. And a lot of the higher ups are driving like the Tahoes and things like that are fuel hogs. And I'm not saying that you need to drive like a little Geo Metro or a Prius or anything like that. I'm just saying as sheriff, or if you were to be sheriff, is there anything you can do different to drive something that's a little more fuel economy, since we're on how much everything's costing, and different vehicles?
Thank you, sir. Generally, we have about 2 minutes for this one. Sheriff, how about driving a more fuel-efficient vehicle?
When you work in public emergencies, you have to have equipment that can go along with it. There are a few four-wheel drives spread out so that we generally don't have big snows on a regular basis, but occasionally we do, and you have to have a true four-wheel drive that goes. Occasionally you have to go out into a wooded area, a farm road, a logging road, something like that. We also check our fuel mileage regularly, but be it the Crown Vics, the Ford Police Interceptor that has the smaller engine, they're all pretty similar. Even the Tahoes now are more fuel efficient, but one of the things is the equipment you have to carry to respond to emergencies. And I also want to say, as far as you asked a question about the turbo, I would like to point out that the Martinsville City Police, every one of their vehicles has turbo, and it was testing it out to see if it made a monumental difference for our fleet. It was an experimentation with new cars coming out, and we were trying to get the citizens the best vehicle to serve them. But with that goes a vehicle that has to do a job for the community, has to carry equipment, has to perform in a certain manner.
All right, Sheriff, I'm sorry, we give Mr. Farmer a chance to speak before the break. Mr. Farmer, how do you respond?
Well, I've always said about the SUVs that the sheriff's office has. I mean, Lane could tell you everything else, but the truth of it is, it's stature. Once you get to a lieutenant or a captain spot, it's almost entitled that you get this big vehicle to show everybody that, hey, I'm a big I'm a big man now. I drive a big vehicle. That's what it is. Even Lane Perry had one, but he finally downsized back to a Taurus, and he says, well, they need to carry equipment in. Well, I'm sorry. I know the captains, and I know a lot of the higher ranking officers that has the SUV, and I'm sorry, they don't carry equipment. Okay, if you're going to give it to somebody, give it to the investigators that do carry the equipment, because I remember I couldn't get everything in my trunk in my Taurus. I mean, it was crammed in there. If the crime scene investigators, they do need those large vehicles to get to crime scenes. But
we need to go to a break, and we will be back right after these messages. Welcome back to our Star News debate between the candidates for sheriff of Henry County, the incumbent, Sheriff Lane Perry, his challenger, former deputy and investigator Jerry Farmer. And we've come to the point in the event when we give each candidate 2 minutes to sum up as they see fit. And Mr. Farmer, your 2 minutes will begin right now.
As I said, when I decided to run, I just didn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I think I'll run for sheriff. Let me jeopardize my retirement. Let me jeopardize, not have a job. I'm the only breadwinner in my family. Let me just put all that in jeopardy and tell the sheriff, hey, I'm going to run for sheriff and know that I might lose my job. That just didn't happen. This decision was made years and years and years ago to run. This is something I've always wanted to do, and I prayed about it, and I thought the time was right to run. And the main reason is I saw stuff at the sheriff's office I wasn't happy with. I saw the morale that was low, and if you believe Lane, there's nothing wrong with the sheriff's office. There's nothing wrong with the crime rate. There's nothing wrong with the community. Everything is fine. But he wants people to believe we have a transparent department, that you can see right in and see what's going on. But that's not the case. I mean, if that was the case, I know a little while we had we had a young lady, juvenile, who said that she was having a relationship with a school resource officer. Now, that resource officer no longer works with us, but, we was left, we don't know what happened after that. I don't think he was charged.
30 seconds.
And, I think the community needed to know that. I know if I had a young girl that went to high school, somebody best be telling me something, because I would want to know. But it was kind of, we didn't hear nothing else about it. So just, if you elect me your sheriff, I'll be visible. I will be there. I'll be visible, and you'll see me out there working in the community all the time. I won't come to work
Thank you, Mr. Farmer.
just 3 to 4 days a week.
Thank you. Sheriff Perry, 2 minutes.
It is a pleasure to serve as sheriff. I well understand what the roles and responsibilities are, and I'm a person that stands in a gap for you, the citizens, to make sure the office works as good as it can. And I would like to say, and hopefully the audience has been shown, but a good number of the employees are here. We do have a very good office. It is a professional office, and we want to continue. We do have a plan in place. We react to the various things that happen, and as we've talked about the fears and insecurities, we do have some thoughts about where we do want the sheriff's office to go as it goes out in front of us in time. We want to do these things, and we hope you give us the opportunity. I ask for your vote on November 3rd to continue serving as your sheriff. What you have heard tonight, we hope you make a very well-informed decision, and I would just like to point out, pay attention to the evidence, the very high solution rate to crimes, the positive comments out within the community, getting out and being seen in the public. I think our office is serving very well. We do have things that we will constantly strive to do, and drugs will always be a big problem. We will fight these as we go along. I would like to point out we've heard a lot of things. I heard, and when someone mentioned transparency, they are to the point that they chose tonight to hide behind a transparency when I asked a specific question. But I will say I do hope to continue serving you as your sheriff. We stand behind what we've already done, and the personnel decisions, these are things that we cannot speak of, but I do maintain we have very quickly and efficiently investigated every matter. These are few and far in between. We have other people come in and make sure we did the right thing so that your office serves with integrity. We don't make a mountain out of a molehill in a personnel decision, but we are also not at liberty to come out and speak about a personnel decision and inform you with what happened. But we can assure you we take every complaint, we listen to everything that goes on, and we make sure your office and only the best people are serving you. We thank you for this time, and once again, I ask you for your vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Well, our thanks to both candidates. Jerry Farmer. Our thanks to Jerry Farmer and Sheriff Perry for being with us tonight for the past hour and a half on Star News, and to our audience as well. Thank you for some very fine questions, and we're glad you joined us this evening. And we will urge you to be involved and vote on November 3rd. For Star News, I'm Ken Echols.